What's up, fight fans? I'm Michael Montero for Boxing Monthly. You're watching the Neutral Corner for the week of May 20th. All right, episode 80, and we're gonna do a lot of Q&A. Thank you guys for all of your questions. You saw I posted a video, a little selfie video on the roof of my building a few days back, and I asked you guys to comment with your questions. I got a bunch of them. I printed out here. I'm gonna read them and answer them. But before we even get to any of that, I gotta give a huge thank you to my man, George. I got your package from Greece. Boom, look at this, guys. From the Joshua Klitschko fight. So this thing traveled from London to Greece, over the pond to the United States, and all the way to the West Coast here in Los Angeles. This is a well-traveled t-shirt, and I shall wear it well. Thank you so much, my man George. It was a great note in there that said, "It's from London, it is," because for those of you who watch TNC, you know I do a horrible British accent here and there. But guys, follow my man George on Twitter. It is at DUDERINER. Cool guy, funny guy, diehard boxing fan. George, next time you're in LA, brother, beer is on me. Okay, let's get to some news and notes. So I talked about this a little bit in a couple other videos and stuff like that, some tweets or whatever, but Canelo Chavez, apparently it did well north of 1 million pay-per-view buys. And remember, when this pay-per-view card was first announced, I thought it would do well over 500,000 buys. I said that in the first rant video I did. And I talked about the big business this thing was gonna do, particularly on the secondary market. Now the promoter, Golden Boy, they don't get the money from the secondary market, at least not officially, unless they're doing some wheeling and dealing behind the scenes. But just with the tickets, look, I just did a little bit of math. There's 21,500 in attendance there for the Canelo Chavez fight. If the average ticket was $475, that's $10 million right there just off of tickets. If this thing did at just 1 million pay-per-view buys, that's $40 million in revenue. Of course, it's 80 million in revenue, but half of that goes to the cable provider, right? But that's 40 million that the promoter keeps. Then the closed circuit was a sellout. That's bringing in a ton of money. Guys, there is tons of sponsors for this thing and a bunch of foreign TV money down in Mexico and also in a few other countries because of some of the fighters on the undercard. So all things considered, with merchandise sales, which was nuts as well, Canelo Chavez was a huge financial success, but also a huge dud. Like I said in my ringside recap that night, it was basically a very long, drawn out, very expensive, lucrative commercial to announce Canelo Golovkin. Some other news and notes. I talked about this in the video that I shot as kind of an intro to this TNC episode. Joe Smith Jr., Sullivan Barrera, July 15th at the Forum. That's going to be the headliner on a triple header on HBO. Not HBO pay-per-view, regular HBO. I do know that the co-feature is going to be Miguel Berchelt defending his title against Takashi Miura. That's going to be a great freaking fight. I'm hearing rumblings about the third fight. It hasn't been solidified yet. As soon as I get some kind of confirmation, I'll let you guys know. But it's going to be a good one. It's going to be 3 solid fights, a very good triple header. HBO got its butt whooped the first quarter of the year, really the first third, maybe even first half of the year. But they're lined up to have a good, strong rebound the second half of the year. Showtime Boxing, not sure what they're doing the second half of the year yet. They had an outstanding first half. But HBO is going to make a comeback in the second half of the year. One other thing, Arthur Beterbiev, leaving his promoter, Yvon Michel, And he was in line for an IBF eliminator fight. Originally, it was going to be against Sullivan Barrera. But when Barrera's promoter lost the purse bid and it went to Michelle, the Canadian promoter, I think they bid like $250,000, somewhere around there. I don't even think it was that much. But the way that the purse bid split worked out, Barrera was only going to get about $60,000, and he wasn't happy with that. So he withdrew from the IBF elimination fight, and he ended up fighting on HBO Latino recently. So Beterbiev was kind of left without an opponent. And he's been, I think, frustrated with his promoter, although he doesn't say that publicly. But he put out a release on all of his social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of it, saying that he was done with his contract with Yvonne Michelle and he was going to leave that promoter and he's kind of a free agent. The promoter says otherwise and says that they're going to have to work out a deal because I think they feel they still have options on Beterbiev, who, by the way, is still managed by Al Haymon. So it kind of sucks because he had a lot of momentum going for a while there, and then he got injured, and it just seems he hasn't really picked up back where he left off since that injury. It just seems like things have fallen for him. And now he's, again, lined up for that IBF title eliminator. Should he win that? I think he's the number 2 light heavyweight right now in the IBF rankings. Their number 1 spot is vacant, and the next available opponent is some guy, I think he's out of Germany, but something that Beterbiev will just walk right through this guy. And then he'd eventually be in line for the winner of the Kovalev-Ward rematch. So more to come with that. That's it with news and notes. Now, I want to get into your guys' questions, and like I said, there's a bunch of them. So I printed them off. I'm just going to read them out here and just answer them one by one. So here we go. Ryan Pawala Higgins asks, my question is about Deontay Wilder. Why do you think Wilder hasn't had the hype behind him in the USA? He's knocked out all but one of his opponents and holds a title, but the American audience doesn't seem to be fully behind him. Ryan, it just comes down to good old-fashioned promotion. We could talk about Deontay Wilder's lack of opposition, which, you talked about he's knocked everybody out except one opponent. That one opponent just happens to be the best heavyweight he's fought, Berman Stiverne. At that time, Stiverne held a title, was a top 10 heavyweight, but that's the only top 10 heavyweight Wilder's fought. He was scheduled to fight Alexander Povetkin. That fight fell apart through no fault of Wilder's, but other than that, he's done absolutely nothing. He hasn't been that active. He hasn't fought anybody that the public cares about. He's done a lot more tweeting and guest commentary on Showtime, calling people out. He went over to the Joshua Klitschko fight. He's gone to several different fights and kind of been ringside and talked a lot, but hasn't done anything in the ring, hasn't backed it up. And quite frankly, he hasn't looked that spectacular in his last few fights. I thought he was losing to Gerald Washington before he hit him with the big right hand. I can't remember if it was the 5th or 6th round of that fight, but I had him down on the cards. On top of all that, though, his promoter, Al Haymon, we know it's his advisor, his manager or whatever, but that's really his promoter, hasn't promoted Wilder. And Wilder's such a great personality. He is the fantasy of what the mainstream media in America wants when they think of a dominant athlete. I'll just say it. He's a big, tall, ripped black dude with tattoos who talks a lot of trash. That's what the American media wants to promote. And he's literally their wet dream. He's ESPN's wet dream. They just don't promote him. So it's up to Al Haymon and to Deontay Wilder himself to do a better job promoting and marketing himself in America. Wilder's probably more well-known in the UK than he is in America. And it's not on the American boxing fans, it's on Wilder and his people. Next question, Timmy Turner asks, what are your thoughts on the World Boxing Super Series? Do you think any big names will participate? Tournaments, generally speaking, boxing tournaments, end up kind of being in the Boxino world. I don't know if you guys remember the Boxino tournaments that ESPN did a couple times in recent years, but you tend to get, there might be 1 or 2 up-and-coming prospects. Usually it's faded former title contenders, maybe even a former titleist in there. it's going to be those B-level opponents, right? And maybe the winner of a tournament comes out being the guy that will challenge for some championships. That's generally how these boxing tournaments work. The last really, really good, strong tournament was the Super 6 tournament that Showtime did. And that worked because you had several promoters all working together on one network, one American premium cable network. So even though it was a little disorganized with all the different promoters and fighters from different countries, it was organized in the sense that it was all on Showtime. And it was kind of streamlined that way, right? Well, with this tournament, it is Richard Schaefer's the head guy, but who does he have on his roster, right? He has some other promoters working with him, but Richard Schaefer is such a polarizing figure. There are so many of the big, powerful promoters, at least here in America, that just won't work with the guy. So that keeps a lot of fighters out. And then you look at the divisions they're going with: cruiserweight, super middleweight. Top-heavy divisions that don't have a lot of talent. They're not stacked, deep divisions. I do think cruiserweight's entertaining, but if you look at the top fighters at cruiserweight, the top fighters at super middleweight, they're not with the promoters running the World Boxing Super Series. So I don't see many big fighters signing up for this, but look, if they match whoever signs up, if they match them the right way, these are two divisions that generally they deliver with exciting fights. So maybe we'll get some exciting fights. Maybe the eventual winners will go on to challenge the top people in the division, but I don't see any A-level elite talent getting involved in this thing, at least not yet. Next question from Exiso. Canelo versus Golovkin is the best middleweight fight since, as far as star power, people fighting at the right time in their career, I'm going to go with Hopkins Trinidad. And the reason why I talk about Hopkins Trinidad, there was a little tournament that took place. Trinidad didn't just immediately move up. He kind of proved himself. I never rated him as a top middleweight, but he had won him, through the tournament, and it was him and Hopkins, the two top guys. Trinidad brought a very dedicated ethnic fan base. And I don't mean ethnic in a racist way, so shut up, you haters. What I mean is he was a Puerto Rican guy from Puerto Rico, and he brought that dedicated fan base, whether they be Puerto Ricans or Puerto Rican Americans, the way Canelo is right now between Canelo and Golovkin. The thing you don't have in this fight is a big American name, but Golovkin has proved himself and been fighting on the premium American network, HBO, for a while now, and he's been on ESPN and all that stuff, TMZ, to where I think these are the two biggest names doing it at middleweight, the two top middleweights. They'll do big business. You probably got to go back to Hopkins Trinidad to find a bigger middleweight fight. Next question. Little Maxie asks, when are you and Tiffany coming to the UK? It's on the bucket list, my man. We wanted to get out there for Joshua Klitschko. It just wasn't in the scheduling as far as getting off of work here in LA. Tiffany had some school stuff she had to wrap up, some studying, some exams she had to take. We just couldn't make it happen. It's on the bucket list. You guys know we work with Boxing Monthly, the best fight magazine in the UK. And we want to get over there and meet everybody. We want to meet you guys. Of course, we want to cover a fight over there and see the way it's done and cover a massive fight. But we just want to meet everybody. Probably won't happen this year. It's going to happen next year, damn it. Joel Azust asks, how was Fury versus Klitschko fight not a no contest if Fury tested positive? That seems ridiculous to me. Okay, I need to clear something up. In the video that my intro video to this episode of TNC, asking for your questions, I talked about Tyson Fury, the UCAD situation. And I should have been more specific. UCAD accuses Tyson and Huey of testing positive for a banned substance, nandrolone, in early 2015, I believe February of 2015. And of course, Fury didn't fight Vladimir Klitschko until I believe that November. The issue is Vladimir Klitschko was never made aware of that. The media was never made aware. None of us were made aware until 6 months after the fight with Klitschko. until mid-2016, I believe, or maybe the spring of 2016. So technically, Fury did not test positive during camp or during the promotion for the Klitschko fight. So there would be no reason to change that to a no contest. However, it does look extremely suspicious when the guy who tested for a banned substance earlier that year, how often did UKAD test him during camp for Klitschko? Why wasn't it made public before the Klitschko fight happened? Because as soon as Klitschko found out, he demanded VADA testing for the rematch. And then you remember what happened with Tyson after that. So it doesn't look very good. And that's why I say there's an asterisk next to that win for Tyson Fury for me. Now, UKAD started doing a hearing with Fury, and then I guess there was a conflict of interest. Now they're saying that the hearing that should have happened in 2015 before the Klitschko fight, should have happened last year if it was going to happen late, might not happen until the end of this year. So it is a complete mishandling of the situation by UKAD. They are compromised. I've told you guys repeatedly, who gives a shit? I don't care if anyone tests with UKAD. If you're not testing with VADA, I don't care. And I remember Eddie Hearn giving me shit because I talked about the drug testing for Joshua Klitschko. It hadn't started yet at the time that I tweeted something out, that the fighters were supposed to be VADA tested, they hadn't started. And Eddie said, well, Anthony Joshua's 365 with UKAD, Mike, so no worries. Well, you know what? UKAD sucks. They rarely, if ever, test anybody anyway. And I would love to see documentation to see how many times they tested Tyson Fury during camp or right after camp for that first Vladimir Klitschko fight. If I was the Klitschko people, I would be demanding that too. Next question. Nutramental asks, do you think Pac versus Horn will be a good match? No. You know, at this stage of Manny Pacquiao's career, honestly, what was the last really good fight he had? I guess that last fight with Timothy Bradley was pretty entertaining, but maybe that's because Bradley had faded a bit. Maybe it's because both guys had faded enough in their careers where they just had some exciting moments there. Pacquiao knocks people down still. He still hurts people. So maybe he can knock Horn down. I think it'll be exciting in the sense that it's going to be a sellout crowd. It's going to be a very passionate home country crowd for Horn. And I do think that Horn's going to go for it. Jeff Horn's going to try his best in those early rounds and maybe he'll give Manny a push, you know, because I doubt Manny's taking him that seriously. But by the middle rounds, Pacquiao should start chopping him up. I expect a few knockdowns, but people are saying that this is set up for Pacquiao to get a big, impressive knockout. Guys, when's the last time he did that? Ricky Hatton? I could see him dropping Horn 2 or 3 times in this fight, and it's still going all 12. So it might be exciting from all the perspectives I said, but I don't necessarily see this as a very good fight. Not at all. Next question from hashtag Joshua Klitschko. Do you think Edladir Alvarez will fight Adonis Stevenson this year? Man, I've ranted about that mandatory situation forever. I don't know what the WBC is doing. I believe Alvarez and Stevenson both have fights lined up. At least Stevenson does right now. Maybe Alvarez just had one and won it. I do believe, all things considered, should they win, should they keep winning, that they will fight at some point late this year. And at that point, you know, Alvarez has been waiting, it feels like 3 years for this mandatory shot. I don't know what Adonis Stevenson and his people have over the WBC. Maybe they have pictures of somebody doing something they shouldn't be doing, someone cheating on their wife. I don't know. But they have held that title hostage for years. And should Stevenson get past Andres Fonfara in that rematch, yes, I do believe he'll finally fight Alvarez. And Alvarez will be really, really pissed off. And maybe he'll make a fight of it. Could be interesting. Oh man, what is this? IKIXIN, Ikixin asks, which of the 4 major belts, if any, would you want to be de-recognized and abolished? Guys, I'm working on a video about the sanctioning organizations, a little history behind them, how they rate. So I'll do a detailed video on this, but off the top of my head, the first one that's got to go is the WBA. They're an absolute joke. They promised 2 years ago, I believe, to consolidate all the titles in their divisions. And I told all of you that it was a complete joke. Don't believe them. And there's a few of you out there who wanted to defend the WBA. Y'all are really quiet right now, aren't you? WBA is trash. They just sanctioned a fight for Paul Smith for another super middleweight title. So go figure. Sean Newton asked, just 1 point. Couldn't Klitschko have come in heavier because he was fighting Fury, who is such a big guy? This is in reference to, again, I go back to the intro fight, or the intro video where you guys left all these questions in the comments section. And there I said that Vladimir Klitschko took Tyson Fury lightly because he came in at 241 pounds for Bryant Jennings, 245 for Fury, 240 for AJ. And there are several other points that I could bring up because I know some of the fighters that were in those camps when Vladimir was training. I'm actually friends with some of those fighters that he brought in to spar. Just the guys he brought in to spar, the way he conducted camp, the length of the camp, the work he was doing in the camps, I can tell you guys, Vladimir Klitschko took Tyson Fury a little lightly. I'm not saying he took him as light as, let's say, Francesco Pineta or somebody like that, but he took him lightly, just as many in the media and a lot of fans did. Tyson Fury is underrated. His craft is underrated. But as far as Klitschko coming in heavier for Fury, that's never been something Klitschko does. You have to remember, he has, I believe, a doctorate in sports medicine. This guy is a gym rat. He's a health freak. He's always in shape. 5 pounds difference for Klitschko means something. 5 pounds difference for most fighters, probably not. But this guy and his brother Vitaly, back when he was fighting, they were health nuts and gym rats. 5 pounds for them is a lot. And if you look at Vladimir's career, the weights he was for Shigaev, Povetkin, Ibragimov, David Hay, it was always in the low 240s, if not upper 230s. And then when you look at the softer touches he's taken, I'm talking guys like Alex Leopai, Pinheiro, I talked about a second ago, Mariusz Vach, and Tyson Fury, mid to high 240s. And he stayed consistently in that 10-pound range for the bulk, or at least the prime of his career, his championship run. But just look, go to BoxRec, you just look at the weights and you'll see the weight fluctuation. When he was fighting a guy that was a real challenge, he came in low 240s every single time. There's no doubt in my mind and in the minds of people that were in those camps that I've talked to privately, Klitschko took Fury lightly. And he was taking him really serious for that rematch. I think Fury knew it. Self-sabotage. It's a motherfucker. Next question, CP Films. What adjustments do you think Ward and Kovalev should make against each other in their rematch? Good question. For Ward, I don't really think he has to make any adjustments. Just don't get knocked down and outboxed early on this time. Basically, he needs to do what he was doing later in that fight. Kovalev has to be much, much busier. He has to... I thought Kovalev started well in that first fight, but he still could have thrown more punches. Down the stretch, he faded a little bit as far as his energy goes. He claims, and Kathy Duva at Main Events claims, it's because he overtrained. He left too much of himself in the gym. He says he's going to train less and do less road work and that kind of preparation for this rematch. But he's up there in Big Bear right now. He posted something the other day where he had run, I think, 20 miles. Maybe it was 20 kilometers. That's too damn much. So I think Sergey Kovalev could benefit from a strength and conditioning coach to get him in prime peak physical condition for his fights. But he's a lone wolf in camp. He doesn't like training with other people. I think that's going to hurt him in this rematch. But simply put, Kovalev has to throw 20 more punches around. Ward has to start faster. That's what they need to do. Another question here. Catchnello, give me my fight, asks, what do you think Ward does if he beats Kovalev? Drop the belts, fight Mandos, blocks himself on social media. You know, whether Ward wins or loses, man, he's going to pretty much do what he always does. He's going to fight very infrequently. I wouldn't be surprised if at some point he dumps a title. Remember, he's with Rock Nation, who has beef with Al Heyman. So unless one of Al Heyman's guys, like, let's say, Stevenson could work themselves into a mandatory type of position, they're never going to do business together. You're not going to see a unification between them. I don't see who Ward's going to fight that's a top guy that we care about. Remember, I talked about Beterbiev earlier. He's managed by Al Haymon. So the difference with Beterbiev is maybe he could get himself into a mandatory position. You know, but in a mandatory position, does Ward want to give up a certain amount of his purse? Because remember, when you're fighting in a mandatory, the sanctioning organization demands the purse split, right? If you can't reach a deal, which Ward wouldn't be able to, is he going to want to give up such a big percentage of the purse to Haymon's side in a purse bid split that's mandated by the IBF? Or would he rather just dump the title? He might just dump the damn title. I think it holds the light heavyweight division hostage and boxing in general and hostage a little bit if Ward wins. If Ward wins impressively and knocks Sergey Kovalev out and calls out Adonis Stevenson and all the top light heavyweights and wants to fight Alexander Gvozdyk and all those guys, cool. If he wants to fight the winner of Joe Smith, Sullivan Barrera, cool. I just don't think he will. That's just not, it hasn't been his MO the last 5 years. He only does when he's forced to, when he's in a tournament or in some sort of contractual obligation. So it's better for boxing if Kovalev wins because we get better fights. GM Strong asks, with the no rehydration clause in place for Canelo Golovkin, does that mean that Golovkin would not have to defend his IBF title because of the contract? No. The way the IBF rehydration rules work are that it doesn't matter what the opponent does. If the opponent says screw it, like Daniel Jacobs did, and you want to still fight for the IBF title, you have to adhere to those rules. So what's probably going to happen here with Canelo is the same thing that happened with Jacobs. I do think Canelo will skip the second day weigh-in. He never steps on HBO's unofficial scale on the second day anyway. So he's going to come in bigger than Golovkin, heavier, sturdier, more solid, stronger. Golovkin will go to the IBF second day weigh-in and weigh 168, 169. Maybe during the fight, he might weigh 171, something like that. So yeah, Canelo's going to be the bigger guy, but Golovkin still has to adhere to those rules if he wants to fight for the IBF title. Sean Thompson asks, you said a prime Vladimir Klitschko would beat Anthony Joshua, but do you think we have seen a prime Joshua yet? Or do you think that AJ could be even better than Vladimir Klitschko, especially in a time when the heavyweight division is getting deep compared to the Klitschko reign? Let me explain this prime thing. You have prime when it comes to craft, knowledge, experience, right? And for men, shit, we don't hit our prime till our fucking 50s with that stuff. But then you have physical prime. And for an athlete, physical prime for a man starts in your late 20s. Now, some guys have a very short physical prime. And let's relate it to fighters. Mike Tyson is an example, right? Fernando Vargas just popped in my mind. Guys like that have a real short peak. This real short physical peak and quickly fade. It's this amazing ride up. It's like a roller coaster when you're going up, right? And then whoosh, come right down. And then there's other guys, it's more like this. Their physical peak is from their late 20s till their early 40s, right? Almost. Guys who have a clean living lifestyle, and fighters particularly who don't get hit a lot, who have a style where you don't get hit a lot, guys like Vladimir Klitschko, Floyd Mayweather, Bernard Hopkins, they have a longer prime. We don't know what Anthony Joshua's prime is going to be yet. But you look at his record, you think 19-0, oh, he must be 21 years old, 22 years old. No, he's in his late 20s. He's in his physical prime as a man. He might bulk up and put a few more pounds of muscle on, which I would be totally against if I was on his team. But no doubt, he's going to get more wise and more experienced as he goes. So he hasn't hit his prime there yet. But physical prime, he's way closer to it than Vladimir Klitschko. And I think that played a factor in that fight. I think that a prime Vladimir Klitschko was sharper and landed those shots more accurately. Shots that were landing here on AJ would land here in Vlad's prime. Regardless of where Joshua was at in his career, those shots would land right here. That's why I say Vladimir Klitschko in his prime beats Anthony Joshua. But that doesn't take away from the fact that AJ won the fight, put on a great performance, and now he's the man in the heavyweight division. Fourth Judge asks, hey Mike, my question for you is, who is your favorite fighter to watch, who is active right now, and who is retired? As far as retired, all-time favorite fighter to watch, Arturo Gatti. And it's not because he was an all-time great or the best or anything like that. It's because he literally left his heart and soul in the ring. When you talk to people who knew Gatti, when you talk to, I mean personally, I don't mean people necessarily even in the fight game, but just personally, he literally left years of his life in that ring for us. It meant something to him. And yes, his life was cut short because of what happened in Brazil, and we still don't know and probably never will exactly know what will happen. But even if that didn't happen and Arturo went on to live into his 80s, right? If his life expectancy was supposed to be 90, he would have only lived to like 83 or something. He left part of his life in that ring, and it was just always exciting. And when you see somebody give so much of themselves like that, you can't help but love them. And I admit, God is just my favorite of all time. Current active fighter. You know, there's no one person that gets me like Arturo Gatti, where I gotta see everything they do, where they can literally bring me to tears. Because Gatti, literally, watching some of his fights, I'm not ashamed to admit it, fucking brought me to tears. Seriously. There's no one fighter that does that for me right now. But the one guy I think who delivers the most bang for your buck, pound for pound in boxing right now is Gennady Golovkin. If you're looking at just pure boxer that just leaves you kind of like in awe, that's probably Vasyl Lomachenko. But we still haven't seen Lomachenko enough of him against the top guys. Just as far as excitement goes and what he's trying to do, and I've talked to Gennady and his team and people around him enough. I know what they're trying to do for this sport in America. Got to go with Golovkin. Next question, Samurai Styles asks, what is your overall assessment of Terence Crawford right now at 140? When do you think he'll move up to 147? And what do you think he can accomplish at welter? Right now, Terence Crawford is clearly the best fighter at 140 pounds. People have talked about a fantasy matchup between Mikey Garcia maybe moving up in weight and fighting Crawford, or even Vasyl Lomachenko moving up from 130 and fighting Crawford. I think Crawford is just too big, too strong, too mean, and too skilled for those guys. I think he knocks out Mikey Garcia. And I don't know if he'd knock out Lomachenko, but he would do enough to win a decision against him. I think Loma's just too small. But at 140, Crawford's the man. I think, you know, he has a fight coming up this weekend, which he should win. And then I think he should go for Julius Ndongo and try to get all the titles. That's what I would do if I were him. But he wants the big fish, and that's at 147. Can he get Manny Pacquiao to get in the ring with him? I know Bob Arum wants it. I know Crawford wants it. I don't know if Manny Pacquiao wants it. Maybe Bob would go out of his pocket a little bit, put enough zeros behind the number on the check to make Pacquiao interested. I'm not sure. Other than that, at 147, I'd love to see Crawford against Keith Thurman. You know, Thurman's got situations he's got to handle, you know, rematches with Sean Porter and I think Danny Garcia and all that, but he should win those. Crawford against Thurman would be a great fight. The winner between Spence and Brook, I'd love to see Thurman against one of those guys. And Thurman has the frame to wear 147 well. The problem with Terence Crawford is his relationship with the media. He's already way too confrontational with the media. He doesn't get it. They're giving away tickets to his fight in New York at Madison Square Garden this Saturday. There are lower level seats for $20 at Madison Square Garden for a prize fight that features one of the pound for pound best fighters in the world. And it is nobody's fault other than Terence Crawford. Great, great fighter, but just doesn't get it. And he's killed his own momentum. It's not on Bob Arum. Arum has really, really tried with that guy. So hopefully Terence starts to get it. It starts to click up here and he can build something. I don't know if that really matters to him. I really, really don't. I think because of that, he's always going to be one of those guys that falls under the radar of the mainstream. He'll be respected by diehards and carve out a Hall of Fame career. I think he has the goods, but I don't think he's ever going to be a superstar, man. Devon Cruz asks, has Golovkin been declining or has his competition been rising? A little bit of both, my man. A little bit of both. His competition's getting better. He is getting older. Guys got to remember, man, 350 amateur fights. He's had 30-some professional fights. He does get hit. Sometimes he does it on purpose. Sometimes it's not on purpose. I thought Jacobs hit him with some great shots that Golovkin wasn't playing around in that fight. Jacobs is a good fighter. He's going to take some punches from Canelo Alvarez, and not just body shots, but jabs and right hands. So he's starting to show some wear and tear. But more than any of that, I think that there's no decline. I just think his competition's getting better, and he's getting a little older. And he's not going to be, you're not going to knock out everybody you fight. You can't keep a knockout streak going forever. You start fighting the best guys, especially when they're bigger and weigh more than you and you're punching up. Look, man, Canelo Alvarez just fought Julio Cesar Chavez, who is completely weight drained. He was a skeleton, and he hit him with everything in the kitchen sink and didn't even put a dent in the guy. Bruised his face up, blackened his eyes, and Chavez was never even wobbled because he was fighting a much bigger guy. And with Golovkin, he just fought Jacobs, who was much bigger. And now he's going to fight Canelo, who's not much bigger, but he is going to be heavier and sturdier than Golovkin and much younger and more in his physical prime. So I don't see a knockout happening in that fight either. Golovkin might not knock anybody else out for the rest of his career unless it's a mandatory type of fight. But as long as he wins and he's dominant, who cares? Next question, Hawker Mustang asks, do you think Chavez Sr. is Chavez Jr.'s real dad? Burn. Yeah, I think they're related. I think that he inherited his dad's chin, and he does have some skills. Chavez Jr., look, man, you go back 5-6 years, he was an interesting looking contender. He had built himself up from a prospect to a contender. He had some good wins. He was kind of a weight bully. He was winning because he was a weight bully, but we could say the same thing about a lot of fighters. We could say the same thing about Canelo at that time. The difference between Canelo and Chavez over the last 5 years is one guy has been a full-time boxer, one guy has been a part-time boxer, and that's what you saw. 23 Doctoro asks, how do you think Spence versus Brook will play out? Look, I think Brook is a borderline, top 15 pound-for-pound level talent. I don't know how he's going to look after bulking up and taking a beat down against Golovkin and coming right back down, going right into a fight like this with Spence. At the same time, I don't know how Spence is going to look fighting in hostile territory for the first time ever. And he's fighting in a big stadium that's going to have tens of thousands of screaming fans. He's going to be fighting the best fighter he's ever faced. Spence won't be. Or I'm sorry, Brook won't be. The best fighter Brook will ever fight, he already fought. Right? He lost that fight, but he went several rounds with Golovkin and had some success with them. So against Spence, who does hit hard and everything else, he doesn't hit as hard as Golovkin. There's a lot of X factors here, right? All things being considered, I think that we're going to see a fight kind of like Joshua Klitschko in the sense that we're going to see one guy learning on the job, a veteran maybe putting him down. Maybe Spence is dropped. Maybe he's buzzed in this fight and has to show something. And if Spence is the goods, like I think he is, I think he responds, he learns on the job, maybe comes back from behind to win this fight. Maybe it's a late stoppage. Maybe it's a decision win. Maybe it's a little closer on the cards than it should be. But I think Spence is the winner. I think youth will be served in that fight. E. Riles asks, Who do you think Beterbiev should sign with now that he's having problems with his promoter, or do you see him getting a title shot with the IBF? He's talking about the mandatory situation I talked about earlier. Again, assuming he gets out of the promotional deal with Yvonne Michelle and all that's worked out, he's still with Al Heyman. Being with Al Heyman limits his options to a degree, Apparently, Bob Arum and Al Heyman have worked things out, but none of Bob Arum's fighters are managed by Al Heyman. Bob don't want to deal with that bullshit. Bob wants to have all of the fighter. He doesn't want to share it and anything like that. Heyman doesn't like signing fighters to big-time promoters. He likes to have them sign and work independently with these sham kind of promoters here and there, depending on which fight it is. All things being considered, if Beterbiev could get out of his managerial contract with Heyman, I say he should jump to Igis Klimas, but that won't happen. I wonder if he'll look at Eddie Hearn, man. You know, if Beterbiev would be willing to move to the UK or at least go over there for training and fight over there, Eddie Hearn could do a lot of work for him. And Eddie Hearn has a very, very good relationship with Al Heyman, and he has a very, very good relationship with Showtime. I don't know. He's in a tough spot, man. Really, really tough spot. Let's see. DCCD asks, there is a UK boxer in the super middleweight division that is recently cleared from a domestic violence dispute in England. I have been watching and studying his highlights, and he looks like the real deal. What is your assessment of Jamie Cox? Jamie Cox, I don't know much about this guy. I've heard about him. I just know that he's had a lot of legal trouble. And I think it's been multiple times where he's had layoffs in his career. And as a prospect, because that's what he still is, he's a 30-year-old prospect. I know that he's 5'11", southpaw, UK guy, good looking, exciting style. He was with Frank Warren, recently signed with Eddie Hearn. Eddie Hearn knows what the hell he's doing. So for Eddie Hearn to sign him, there must be something to him. But 30 years old, he's got to get started, man. So let's see. At this point, he hasn't fought anybody that would make me take him seriously. But for Eddie Hearn to pick him up, again, there must be something to this kid. So I'll be interested to see him. Last question from Guy Schneider. Whatever happened to Irizlandi Lara? Seems he fought in January, but I didn't even hear about it. Yeah, this goes back to that certain someone that I've talked about a few times. That advisor who really works as a promoter, Al Heyman. Look, Irizlandi Lara, there's not a whole lot you could do with him because he's not a very exciting fighter, and he's not really doing this to entertain fans. He's doing it because it's pretty much all he's good at, and that's how he makes his money. He's taking care of his family. More power to him. But he lives in the PBC universe where he's going to fight once a year, maybe twice a year. And they don't announce fights 4, 5, 6 months ahead of time like other promoters do. They don't even discuss possibilities of opponents. Lara's been talking for years about challenging Gennady Golovkin. Whatever happened to that? All you guys that were saying Golovkin's ducking Lara, where are you now? Silent, as you always are. How about Lara fight Charlo in unified titles? How about he handles business at 154 pounds? Why don't we ever hear him talk about that? Why doesn't he call out people that the deal could be made in 5 seconds because they're both managed by the same people? Why doesn't he ever call out those fighters? It's because he doesn't give a shit. He wants to fight once a year, maybe twice, make as much money as he can for the lowest risk possible. It's his prerogative, but that's why you don't ever hear about the guy. Enough with the Q&A for right now. Guys, awesome questions. We're going to do this again, and more to come. We're going to do this in a more interactive way. I got some stuff planned. We'll talk about that more in the coming weeks and months. But for right now, let's do a quick review of what we saw last week. So 2 good scraps over in the UK. In Yorkshire, Josh Warrington improves to 25-0 with a majority decision over Kiko Martinez. One judge had this a draw. The other 2 judges had it 116-112 for Warrington. Look, there's some people in the UK that are excited about this fighter. He beat Martinez, who is a quality fighter who's been in there with some top fighters. I'm not that excited about Warrington because he's yet to fight and beat an elite level fighter. He does have a minor featherweight title right now, but guys, pump the brakes a little bit. That is a loaded division, man. You got Leo Santa Cruz, Carl Frampton, Abner Mars, Quigg, Selby, Valdez, Cuellar, Diaz, Mijares. You've got a bunch of names that are well above anything that Warrington has fought yet. So let's see him develop. Let's see him build up his opposition. This is definitely a good win for him to build on. In Birmingham, really good scrap between Khalid, Yafai, and Suguru Maranaka, a Japanese fighter. Those Japanese fighters are tough, and they always bring it, man. Yafai improves to 22-0 with 14 knockouts. He knocked down Murata in the second round. This was the first defense of his WBA super flyweight title. He beat Luis Concepcion for that title, I think earlier this year, maybe it was late last year. Can't remember off the top of my head, but it was a vacant title. A lot of people are excited about this guy over there in the UK. And I understand, he's exciting. He was in a good scrap where he was tested and he responded. There's a lot to like, but everyone, pump the brakes. I know he has a title. Okay, that is a loaded division. Chocolatito, Inoue, Rungvisai, Estrada, Quadras. A lot of good quality fighters. What I'd like to see from Yafai now is maybe go after somebody like a Brian Valoria, a McWilliams Arroyo, one of those quality guys that's just below elite level. Go after somebody like that. Let's see how he looks against somebody like that before we get too excited, okay? But good scrap. If you could find that on YouTube, my boy, Davey Boy Essex, he posts everything. I don't know how he does it. He does it almost instantly. He's got these fights on YouTube. But check him out, Davey Boy Essex. He has all the fights, man, and he posted this one. Good stuff. Guys, let's get into the preview of what's coming up this week. We've got a bunch of action from all over the world this weekend. Let's start over in Tokyo, where we've got a triple header. The headliner, Hassan fighting Ryota Murata for the vacant WBA regular middleweight title. I hate the goddamn WBA. Oh man, do they suck. Look, this is set up for Murata to win. And I don't mean like, you know, conspiracy theory like the fix is in. I'm saying Murata is being lined up for a title shot here. He's a Japanese guy fighting in Tokyo. He's fighting a guy in Indam who's very, very tough, gets knocked down a lot, always gets back up though, right? You remember that fight against David Lemieux he had, let's say a couple years ago, it might have been 3 years ago, where Lemieux must have dropped him 4 or 5 times. He keeps getting back up. I think he fought Peter Quillen, same thing. I don't know if Murata's got the power to knock Indam out. I don't think so, but maybe he scores a knockdown or two. If he doesn't, I don't know how for real Murata is. But all things considered, Indam, tough guy, will keep coming, but doesn't punch very hard. Isn't quite elite. Has been in some wars, has taken some punishment. So I think this is perfect matchmaking for the Japanese fighter in the sense that he will get tested. He will have a guy in there that's going to push him, that's going to check him. But I think Murata should respond. If he struggles in this fight and barely beats Indam, that's all you need to know about Ryota Murata, and that will tell you where his ceiling is. But I see him winning a decision here and grabbing this title. Also on this card, 2 Mexican fighters defending their WBC titles against 2 Japanese fighters. Ganigan Lopez defending his WBC Super Strawweight title or Light Flyweight title, whichever you prefer, against Ken Shiro. And Juan Hernandez Navarrete defending his WBC Flyweight title against Daigo Higa. I expect both of the Japanese fighters to come away with decision victories and claim those titles. In London, at the Copper Box Arena, Gervonta Davis going up against Liam Walsh. This is the fight of the freaking weekend. Great matchup. Great matchup. Davis 17-0, 16 knockouts. Walsh 21-0, 14 knockouts. Davis has the IBF 130-pound title, super featherweight title, that he won off Jose Pedraza back in January, off that beatdown. Even though he has that title, I still consider him a prospect. And these are 2 young, undefeated prospects fighting each other to prove which one is a true, legit contender. A top 10, maybe even top 5 fighter at 130 pounds. Another stacked division. I do expect Davis to come away with the victory here. Davis is 5'6", 69-inch reach, southpaw, 22 years old. Walsh a little bit bigger, 5'7", a little bit longer, southpaw, 30 years old. The X factors here. Walsh is the older guy, so mentally and emotionally a more mature guy. He's a man fighting a young man. Also, it's in Walsh's backyard. Davis is fighting on hostile territory. So if I'm Walsh, I'm going and trying to get respect early. I'm putting some leather on Davis early and make him respond because he's never been in that situation before. But this will be a good one, man. If you can find a stream, check this one out. Now, on Showtime at the MGM National Harbor, Gary Russell defending his WBC featherweight title against Oscar Escandón. As little as Gary Russell is, short little guy, Escandón is even shorter than him. Tiny little guy. Russell coming in off a one-year layoff, but he's so much better than Escandón, who's completely overmatched in this one. He should take this victory. Andre Dirrell, he's also returning from a one-year layoff to fight Jose Uzcategui for the interim IBF Super Middleweight title. This is also a matchup where Dirrell should win easily. I don't particularly love this card. Not the best. It's a pretty weak doubleheader. These are showcase fights for two PBC guys. They should get the victories here. A Fox Sports 1 card from Laredo, Texas. Undefeated American prospect, super middleweight prospect, David Benevidez out of Phoenix, Arizona. He's fighting. He's the main event fighter. 17-0, 16 knockouts, 6'2", 74-inch reach. Good-looking super middleweight prospect. Good-looking American prospect. We don't have many American fighters in that division right now. So check that out if you can. Those Fox Sports 1 cards, they can be fun sometimes. And then the big name card, I talked a little bit about it earlier, from Madison Square Garden on HBO. Terence Crawford defending his WBC and WBO junior welterweight titles against Dominican Olympian Felix Diaz. Diaz is a good quality, well-rounded fighter, knows how to handle himself in there. Undersized against Crawford. I think that this will start technical and slow. I think that Crawford should start chopping him down in the middle rounds. Crawford should get him out of there late. There should be a late accumulation, stoppage, corner, ref stoppage, something like that. If that doesn't happen and this goes all 12, that's kind of a moral victory for Diaz and a moral failure for Crawford. I talked before about the tickets. This is going to be a very, very small crowd. They're going to have to give tickets away. I think in the last couple days they'll get people in there, but really, really disappointing that Crawford's been so confrontational with the media, with all the issues he's had outside the ring in his personal life. The worst thing he could do is be a dick to the media, and that's kind of what he's doing. Basically, if you report on the stuff that's happened in Crawford's personal life, he blacklists you from covering his events. Just doesn't get it, man. But either way, he should get the victory here. It should be a pretty dominant one. Also, Raimundo Beltran and Konstantin Pomeranov are fighting on that card, and they should get victories. They're both matched up against guys that it's pretty much showcase fights for them. For Crawford and Diaz in the main event, it's their first fight of 2017. And, you know, for Crawford, he needs to be fighting a few times a year, especially against opponents at this level. Hopefully, if he gets out of this unscathed, he's fighting again by the end of the summer, you know. And the best thing he could do is, if he scores a big knockout win in this fight, is apologize, you know, in the post-fight interview with Max Kellerman, apologize for some of the crap going on outside of the ring and some of the confrontational behavior with the media and stuff. Apologize to the fans and call out Manny Pacquiao. Clearly, concisely. Call him out in a definitive way that gets fans talking. Well, that's it for this week, guys. I've said a mouthful. I need to go drink some water. You guys know the deal. Like, share, subscribe. I'll see you at the fights.